Um, we are going to be recording this. So just as we like to say, if you're going to say something, make sure it's appropriate because it's going to be recorded and probably in the internet for the rest of time. I think that's what people say. Okay, well, thank you. Happy Thursday. Welcome everyone coming in. So today, just a couple of ground rules that we always want to bring, we always want to discuss. So you can go ahead and leave your camera on. If you want to come on, if you want us to see who you are, if you want to just be a part of this with us, that's fine. We're going to see the panel most of the time, but we want to have you guys be on, be comfortable as well. Also with microphones, we have access to turn your microphones off, but we want to encourage folks to do that on your own. If you are going to speak up, that's fine. We're going to have times during this where we'll ask people to come in to say something. So we'll ask you to take your microphones off at that point. But until we get to that point, please just go ahead and keep those microphones off. And this is great. So those of you who have been attending for quite some time, we've had probably the last 4 or 5 sessions, we've had somebody outside come in and do a training for us, LinkedIn, Disability Solutions, Jan, but we're actually coming back. We got the team back again. So the panel that you see here in front of you, we are going to be doing a little bit of presentation. So thank you. And team, tech gurus, is there anything I missed? Okay, well, that's great. So there may have been a very slight issue with the Eventbrite link. So if you are looking around, looking through the list of people and you're not seeing somebody on here that said that they were going to be here, if you don't know, up in the left-hand corner, there's the shield. If you click on that shield, you can copy the link and share that with anyone that you think should be here that's not here. So we'll go ahead and let you know that, and then we'll begin. So what I'm going to do, I believe, I'm going to pass this off to Priscilla.
Hi, Spencer. Thank you so much for handing it over to me. So as Spencer stated, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's workshop. Today presenting is going to be facilitated by the California Cross District Training Committee. So we're going to be reviewing how to explain a gap in your work history. So I'm just requesting, thank you. Okay, so today we are going to be discussing the following. So let's just review the learning objectives. So we are going to discuss types of employment gaps, how to structure a resume and a cover letter, and then we are going to explain how to talk about a gap during an interview. All right, so know that 90% of people have been unemployed at some point in their working age lives. So you are not alone. Despite breaks in your employment history, the decision of whether or not you will get hired will ultimately come down to your qualifications for the position. Employers place more value on prior work experiences and tenure. So those transferable skills are really important, and you can transfer those into whatever profession it is that you're looking to get into. And this makes sense, right? There are many reasons why you might have been out of work, but your previous experience and how that experience applies to a new position is your main selling point as a job candidate. So no, a major gap in employment shouldn't prevent you from being hired. Just make sure you address it directly from the beginning. Be prepared to talk about it if you're asked by an HR recruiter or hiring manager, and let your qualifications along with the rest of your experience shine. Oh, thank you, Jessica. So let's see if I could get to the next one. There we go. So what is your reason for an employment gap? So we're going to take a poll. Can you bring that up, Jessica, please? And we want you to just select one of the reasons as to why you have one of the most common reasons why you feel job seekers experience a gap in employment. So just please take the time to choose one of these that applies to you. Thank you for putting those votes in. We see them coming in. All right. I think for the most part, most people are putting their votes in. All right. So I am going to share the results. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay. So as we can see, what's up on the poll, we can see that, let's go with the most common, personal. 57% of you guys voted that personal is one of the reasons you have experienced a gap in employment. Then we have 36% layoff was a reason for gap in employment. And then COVID related, 7% training or school. So you were either attending some type of training program or some type of educational school program. And then we have caregiving responsibilities, and that's a big one. 7%. 7% caregiving. And nobody selected fired. So yeah, these are reasons why we can see a gap in employment, and we're definitely gonna talk about this. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, here we go. So if you have a gap in your work history, be prepared to talk about it. So I took time and then the reason not employed. So an example could be, I took time to focus on my health. During that time, and then what you did during that gap. So what did you do? You can say, I assured I got well and improved my overall well-being. And then you want to close by stating, returning to work was at the top of my mind during that period, and I'm ready to do that now. So basically, you're explaining to that employer that you're ready to get back to the workforce. Let's go into detail. So I'm going to hand this over to Spencer to give us some specifics on how to explain those gaps in employment.
Priscilla, thank you so much. This is Spencer again. All right, everybody, I'm back. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. Use the chat. If you want to let us know who's on the call, go ahead and let us know who's there. If you want to communicate back and forth with others, that's fine too. And if you want to ask questions, we will be monitoring that. So I'm still looking. I've got my other monitors set up, and it's got 90% of people have been unemployed at some point in their life. I'm still hung up on that. And I was thinking of the one time, how many people have been to trainings and you've heard that one person say, I've been hired for every job I've ever applied for. Every interview I've done, I've been hired for that position. Man, that's not me. I love it. That sounds really bad, right? But I've fallen on my face during so many interviews. You might not believe this, but sometimes I ramble on. Are you seeing what's happening here? And that's what happened. I remember when I was, right before I got hired with Pride Industries, I was in a gap. I was in a waiting place. And it wasn't, of course, it wasn't by choice. But it was a situation that was challenging, it was really painful. And I think that those are the types of experiences that allow us to be better at what we do, or allow us to be more empathetic with the folks that we're connecting with. So let's go ahead and take a look when we're explaining some of the gaps of employment. So I love to be a caregiver. Now, we were just on a call a couple days ago with several different job developers and a lot of folks who've been in the field for quite some time. And the topic came up, hey, when we have people who haven't been working, we're always trying to figure out, well, how do we use what they've been doing to come up with some idea of, showing off their skills, showing off the examples of what they've been doing. So for this example, we're talking about is filling this gaps. This is one for a caregiver, and I know you guys are on here, and if you can read or not, I'm gonna end up reading this. But if you left it a caregiver, one example, one thing that you can say is, I spent some time as the primary caregiver in my family. During that time, I was able to be there for my family, but I always knew I wanted to return to work. And now I'm ready to do that. So it could be family, it could be children, it could be a spouse, it could be parents. A lot of times we see that as well. You might be that primary caregiver for somebody. But what I love here, what they do in this question, what we're giving that information back is to say, I always knew there was going to be something. So I was preparing. I was putting myself in a place to when I got to this point, I was going to be ready. So, what are we doing during this time, during this gap that's allowing us to get to that next point? So you can even add something on here that says, I was on a computer training. I went to LinkedIn and I learned how to create a LinkedIn profile so I can share and be connected socially with others on that point. So caregiver, what are some of the other ones that we have? I was laid off by an employer. So laid off, this happens. I mean, this is something that I know a lot of times we didn't say nobody was fired, but COVID could have been some layoffs for individuals. This is a typical thing, and I want to encourage folks not to be embarrassed, but that this happens. And so employers are going to know, they know that this type of downsizing does happen. So one thing we're saying here is if you're laid off by your employer, my former employer underwent a restructuring that resulted in my position being eliminated. Eliminated. While this was difficult, I left with the confidence. I had developed important skills there, and I built strong relationships with my manager and colleagues. So the nice thing about that is when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, this person has a reference. This person has somebody to reach out to. This person has somebody that when their next employer is out looking to call, they've got a person that they can reach out to. This wasn't a negative thing. It's definitely difficult, but it's not a negative leave. So what other things could give us a gap? So from my job, so I was fired. This one does happen, not in our group, which is really awesome. So I'm excited to hear that no one in here has ever been fired. I've worked in positions where I've been let go. That's a term, right? I've been fired on some small jobs that I've worked on, but we'll get into that. Maybe that next training we can bring on what did we do to get fired? And now where do we go from here? But let's look at this. So if you were fired from your job, the company and I had different expectations. In reflection of that experience, I realized that there are some things that I could have done differently. I learned a great deal, and I'm excited about the opportunity to bring that maturity to my next job. So I love this because how many of us are thinking, I got fired, that jerk, those guys were terrible. I don't want anything to do with them again. The manager never agreed with me. Those aren't really the things that we're going to say in an interview, right? Even if we're feeling that way, the reality is we can probably look on that other side and find the positives. And I think that's what this individual did here. We're reflecting on that experience and what positive things we did gain in that. And that gives us an opportunity, one, to show what skills we know and show that we're not a bad sport and that we can be a team player and that, you know, we're somebody that is willing and that would be good to get a second chance to. All right, and so I took time off for personal reasons. There's a lot of different personal reasons. I just talked to somebody the other day who was telling me about a sabbatical that they took. And I thought, I need to take a sabbatical. That's a really great idea. And then I read into it and I thought, okay, well, I don't think I'm there. I don't need that right yet, but great opportunity. So you could have been in a gap for taking our time off for personal reasons. So you could tell your employer, the individual trying to hire you, I was able to take some time off of work to focus on myself. My time away prepared me to take on new challenges. I'm incredibly excited about the opportunities that lie ahead in this position. Now, this is a tricky one. I mean, I think about this, taking that time off, that employer, we got to be ready. We got to be quick on our toes. So I'm a coach, and a lot of times I'm always telling my team, get in that ready position. You got to be ready to be on your feet and jump around and move around. And the same way when you're sitting in an interview setting, you got to think ahead of time, what are they going to ask me? What are the things, if I tell them that I've been off for personal reasons, what kind of things am I going to need to be prepared for to come out and to share? And I think this is a really good way to answer that. But the big thing to remember too, don't tell anything that you're not uncomfortable following up. You know, have confidence in what you say because it's going to show. If you come off and you're like, well, I was away, we don't want that. You know, talk about what you're confident talking about. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share, right? So you're coming into this, and I tell folks when we're doing interviews, I tell them all the time, make the interview yours. And if you come in, you bring that confidence in, you bring that explanation that you know that you wanted to share, that's the way you make that interview yours. And then laid off due to COVID. Yeah, so we had 7% of folks that that mentioned that they were laid off due to COVID. This has been the most unbelievable time. Last year, I was having a conversation with somebody today, and they said, hey, do you remember last year we did this? It didn't even feel like a year. It was just such a strange year. And there was a lot of stuff. If you're in food service, if you were in, you know, different industries, different fields, there were a lot of folks that just couldn't keep open. And there were a lot of businesses that just weren't able to keep on staff. But in this situation, again, we're not alone. You're not alone. So if something does come up, my employer, an answer could be considered. My employer underwent a downsizing due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. That resulted in my position being eliminated. It was difficult, but I left with the confidence that I had developed important skills there and build strong relationships with my management team and colleagues. Now, the neat thing about this, I'm always looking, how do we network in this? So just on a side note, if we're in a situation right now, and this is it, we have some networking folks there. The employer is still a great opportunity to network and connect with those other coworkers. Maybe they're working, maybe they're not working. That's always the first time when I've worked with somebody recently who's in this situation, I say, reach out to colleagues. What are they doing? What are the resources that they're jumping on? But I digress. So just remember, put those positive, put the positive out there and feel confident when you're having that conversation. All right, so thank you. And I will be handing it over to Kathy.
To me? Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica from Golden Sierra. Nice to see you all. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Priscilla. So now we're going to go kind of transition into not so much how do you talk about it in your 30-second me or your introduction, but where do you put it on your resume? How do you explain that employment gap on your resume, on your cover letter, and in those interview questions like Spencer was talking about? So I love resumes. It's kind of a little secret. I love editing resumes. I don't really like creating them, but and it's kind of a weird thing that I do. I love formatting them. I love trying to get them to look the way that we want. So I'm going to go into some tips and tricks to downplay the gap and also just some general resume information. Apologize, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. Okay. So it's not always necessary to include every job you've had on your resume. Sometimes we think, well, I need to put every single job down, everything I've ever done, every experience I've ever had. It's absolutely not true. What you need to have on your resume is the recent and relevant work experience that is going to lead you into getting the job that you're applying for. That's the most important thing. One of the things that you can do to downplay the gap is instead of writing the month or the date that you got hired to the date that you stopped working there, you can only include the year. So what this does is, let's say you only worked somewhere for 3 months, but it was December, January, and February. You could actually put in 2016 to 2017 instead of putting December 2016 to February 2017. Just to downplay what those gaps look like. And that's not lying, that's just creative editing, right? On your actual application, you're going to have those hard dates, but for your resume, there's ways to kind of downplay it a little bit. One of the things I really want to stress is don't lie on your resume. Don't extend your dates of employment so that it looks better. You can play with it, but you just don't lie because it will almost always come back to bite you later. So I would always suggest using a functional format if you have a gap in your experience. Actually, I would almost always with the people that I work with say functional formats work best. It allows you to focus on your skills and achievements as opposed to your work experience. And what that means is your resume can actually clearly look or mirror what the actual job description is that you're applying to. So you're going to use exactly what that employer is looking for and put that into your resume. That's the goal. You want that employer to pick up your resume and say, oh my gosh, this person hits every single skill or the majority of the skills I'm looking for. Definitely want to bring them in for an interview. It allows you to use the skills that you gained during your gap in your resume. So let's say you didn't work for 3 or 4 years due to any reason, maybe due to being any of the reasons that Spencer went over earlier. Let's say you were a caregiver. Well, you weren't doing nothing during that time. You were caring for someone. You were probably scheduling. There's so many transitional skills that you can actually take out of what you did during your gap and put into a functional resume. And the reason you're able to do this is because you're not saying, I worked here and did this job. You're saying, I know how to do this skill. So it's really a great way to be able to highlight the skills no matter where you got them from, whether it's being a caregiver, from your job, from your education, during your volunteer time, anywhere that you have gained skills in your life, you can add those to the resume if they are something that reflects the job you're trying to go for. It allows you to highlight your most relevant skills at the top of your resume. So I really like formats that have some kind of a summary at the top where you're able to maybe give a quick description of maybe Microsoft Office, the technical skills that you have, any kind of projects that you've been on, those types of things at the top. And then at the very bottom is where you're going to list your actual work experience and your gaps. And I'll show you that on the next slide. Actually, I'm going to show you the top on the next slide. So this is a summary of skills that I really like using. It's just a format that I enjoy having at the top. And what it allows you to do is take that top line and you can actually write down job titles that you've had or job titles that you're interested in going for. So this particular person went through a training for medical coding and building and medical front office and back office work. So what she did was she actually put the job titles of the certificates she has at the top. Then she lists her technical programs that she's very proficient in. And then she lists those soft skills that employers are looking for. So that prioritizing, communication, problem solving, those types of things. So it's just a mini snapshot at the beginning of your resume for the employer to be able to see, oh, this is the kind of job that you're looking for. So this is where that work experience piece at the bottom comes in. So you can list care provider, private family, Sacramento, California, and then the years. So that would be your gap year, right? So in this experience, or for this particular person, they stopped working in 2020 and they're looking for work now. So that's why they put 2021. And they stopped working to be a care provider. And that's because their children were taken out of school. And so they had to stop working in order to stay home due to COVID. And so you don't have to list what private family, you don't have to say that you were taking care of your own child. You wouldn't have to say if you were taking care of an ill family member, or maybe if you were ill yourself. You just have to say something kind of innocuous that that allows you to put those dates in and say what you were doing during that time. And then moving on to the cover letter. So just like Spencer did with his the 30-second me, the how to kind of explain to an employer out loud verbally what you were doing during the time of your gap, you want to put that in your cover letter as well. So here's an example of a sabbatical. I thought it was funny that Spencer mentioned sabbatical since it's on here. As you might have noticed in the resume, I took a year sabbatical from 2016 to 2017 to travel across Europe and Asia. This experience strengthened my understanding of the market and its needs, and I'd love to share those insights with you. I look forward to learning more about the position and your organization's vision for this role. Thank you for your time and consideration. So just like what Spencer did, they elaborated on what the time off was. So maybe on your resume it says sabbatical 2016-2017. Well, here's the place where you're going to elaborate a little bit more. So it says exactly what they did. And then it says how that time could possibly maybe increase their value to the employer going in. So you want to make sure that you have both of those components in there. So why you had the gap and what you did to improve yourself, or how that's going to make you better coming back to the workforce. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for interview.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was wonderful. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you would address gaps in employment during the actual interview. So be truthful but brief. Explain why you were unemployed. Explain what you did during your gap. Stay optimistic about your return, and pivot the conversation back to your qualifications. So I have a little example on the next slide that I want to share with you. Okay, so I had to take some time off work due to an illness. I used my time off from work to upgrade my office skills and completed several computer courses, including both Microsoft and Google Suite. Now I'm back on track and I want to resume my career. I believe my experience working in an office environment and recent training will be an asset for the administrative assistant position for ABC company. So again, let them know that you were productive. You don't have to share anything that you're not comfortable with, just like Spencer said. In this particular example, it could be either a physical illness, it could be a mental health issue. It doesn't matter. It's really it's not the employer's business to know exactly what the issue was. They just really, they just want to hear you address it first so that they don't have to wonder about what you were doing. Okay, next slide. So again, during the time off, make sure use your time wisely, earn some certificates relevant to your industry. Spencer mentioned that LinkedIn has many training opportunities. Google has a lot of training opportunities. Take continuing education courses. Maybe you want to learn a new language. And be active in professional associations. If you graduated from college, you might want to get back in touch with your fellow cohorts, people that you attended college with, and also volunteer. That's one of the things as a business specialist. If I have someone come to me and they haven't worked in a while, I say to them, well, have you ever volunteered? And have you been volunteering recently? And try to volunteer somewhere that's semi-related to what you're interested in. And no matter where you volunteer, you're going to pick up some important skills to be able to put on your transferable skills to put on your resume and kind of eliminate some of those gaps that you may have had otherwise if you weren't volunteering. Next slide. Again, call in your network. Spencer did a great job talking about that. Reach out to people that you know in your past jobs. Find out, hey, is anybody hiring? Your best friends. Say you're standing in line at the drugstore and you see your friend Susie. Hey, Susie, what's going on? Not much. What are you up to? Well, I'm looking for work now, and this is what I'm looking for. Do you know of anyone that's hiring? And that kind of thing. And a lot of times, I have a son who's really great at networking, and he lived in LA for a while. And that's how he was able to survive. He's like, hey, I'm looking for this, or do you know anyone that's hiring? And one time he was working as a bartender, and he had these regular customers come in. And they said, you are so great at customer service, and I can see how you have your time management, and you're organizing everything behind the bar. How would you like to come work for us? And it was a construction company, and they actually hired him to oversee the as a superintendent, to oversee the jobs, the construction jobs. So you just never know, where you're going to connect with someone. Next slide. And again, hopefully you've left on good terms, but going back to previous employers, and maybe you haven't left on such a great term, but maybe you had a really great working relationship with a coworker. You can always ask that coworker if they'd be willing to be a reference for you. So if you're able to provide that reference from your previous employer, that will go a long ways towards resolving any negative issues regarding gaps in employment. Say you were laid off because of COVID and not because of anything that you did. If you're willing to give them your previous supervisor's name and number, then they're going to have confidence in your abilities, okay? And that you didn't leave for negative reasons. So this is really important. When we're not working, we tend to kind of go into a funk. And maybe our routines, we don't have a regular routine. And I find that we just function better as humans if we have something to look forward to or some kind of schedule in our day. So give yourself little small weekly goals. And once you accomplish those goals, reward yourself. I know this may sound silly, but I like to give myself facials. So maybe I go to the dollar store and pick up a facial or something after I've contacted 3 employers, and then, relax for about 15 minutes. Go buy yourself a latte at Starbucks because you filled out 3 online applications, or, take a walk with your dog. Anything that's going to de-stress yourself and kind of join a job club. We have a job club at the Department of Rehabilitation that you can go and not only gain support, but help support others during the job search, because it can be really stressful. Next. So these are some of the top questions that came up during past gaps in employment presentations. I'm just going to share a few of them with you, and then we're going to open up the floor for your questions. So the first one would be, should you address employment gaps directly on your resume or leave that for the interview? Now, I think we've kind of addressed that before, but I would definitely say, for instance, you did have a gap in employment and you were a caregiver, just like the example showed earlier, put the dates, caregiver, January, 1st to 2020 till December, make sure you put the dates and then list the specific things that you did. That way there's not going to be any gaps in employment. And then how do you explain an employment gap due to mental illness? That is exactly, we kind of went over that again, but I would say something like, I had to take time off work to recover from an illness. Now I'm back on track and I want to resume my career. Just as simple as that. Just the facts, Jax. You don't have to say anything more. And then go directly into why you think you're going to be a great fit for that position. And again, explaining gaps in employment due to COVID-19, not millions, but hundreds of thousands of Americans lost their jobs during COVID. So employers are really understanding right now. And again, if you can give your past employer's name and number so that future employer can check that, yes, indeed, you were laid off for COVID reasons, there should be no problem at all. And then how do you know if an employment gap is causing you not to get an interview? Well, the simple answer to that is you're not going to know that for sure, but just make sure, again, that you have, if you do have a gap in your resume, make sure you address it on your cover letter, like Jessica so eloquently shared with us, so that they don't have any questions. And then last but not least, I was told resume scanning software will eliminate you as a candidate if you have an employment gap of more than 1 year. How would you solve this? I actually did some research on this and I have found no evidence of that. So I'm not really sure where that question came from. But again, just make sure you have your dates in there so that that doesn't happen. And I think we're going to open it up to specific questions now. I know I saw a lot of questions coming up in the chat. So
Kathy, I was keeping track of those.
Okay.
I can just kind of go down the line.
Okay.
The first question is, how do you address multiple years of an employment gap? So maybe longer than, a year or a few months, but like, let's say it was like 3 to 5 years or something like that. How would you address multiple years of an employment gap? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
I would say the same way that you would address a shorter gap. And if you're looking at your resume, or even when you're speaking about it, you're still taking the focus off of maybe the reason for the gap and refocusing the interviewer on what you did during that time to make yourself ready to return to work, or what your skills and assets are.
Okay. And then the next question is, how do we explain the gap of employment if we have developed a disability, but it doesn't compromise your ability to perform the job just as well as prior to your disability?
I'll take that. You don't have to say that the reason, you could briefly say, like we said before, that you had an illness that has since been resolved. It will not interfere at all with this particular position, and then immediately go into what your qualifications are for the job. But
and I would say too, you don't even have to say it's an illness. You can say personal reasons. You can, there's all kinds of different verbiage that you can use without disclosing if you're not ready or interested in disclosing.
That's true.
Okay. And then there were some other questions. related to, let's see, some other things about kind of besides just gaps in resumes. So one of the questions is it always best to use references from most recent employers, even if the current job that you're interested in doesn't relate to maybe your most recent job?
So I think that using references is more for how you are as an employee, as opposed to maybe the skills that you had in that past job. So it's more, do you get along well with your coworkers? Are you going to be a good fit for the company, instead of focusing on, maybe the specifics of the job? So I would say recent would be better. What do you guys think?
Hi, this is
I,
Spencer.
oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I
thanks.
was going to say, I agree. I think that you could have, sorry, all this like awkward Zoom. So I would say both. Like, I think that you could, usually they ask for 3 references. So I would say most recent for sure, or current, and then your additional ones that maybe more relate to that job. But usually, like Jessica said, they're asking, do you show up to work on time? Are you a reliable employee? And no matter who you use for a reference, you always want to make sure that they know that you're putting them down as a reference. All too often, I've seen, even when I'm calling references for if I'm doing a hire, that individual has no idea that they're listed as a reference. Maybe they don't check their voicemails. Maybe their, work phone is listed instead of their cell phone, and they're not even at work, they're working from home. So I would say definitely make sure that they know they're listed as a reference and that their correct contact info is on there.
And that they're willing to be a reference.
Yes.
Yes.
And to add to that, just one extra thing, if you can send your reference a copy of your most recent resume, then they'll have, they'll be reminded of what you did there, in case it's been a few years, and, we don't always remember everyone perfectly.
Which brings up to a good point of networking. If you have those people that you're already considering, keep those people in touch. Even if it's somebody that's 5 or 10 years back, I've had references come on who were maybe 7 years, which might sound ridiculous, but I have a regular check-in with most people. If it's quarterly, if it's yearly, just to check in so that you have that person, because they're going to be able to have a longer term explanation on what my skills are than maybe somebody that I just had for a year and a half. So I'm in agreement to both of those. I think both new, previous, 10, 20, well, maybe not 20 years. But yeah, good question.
One further thing to say is make sure you get your referral, like if you have a reference letter, and keep in contact, like Spencer is saying, hey, is it still okay for me to use it as a reference and for me to update the letter? And just keep updating that electronic version, and then, editing it as you need to. That way you always have a copy, because I can't tell you the amount of people that I work with that say, oh, I used to have a reference from someone, but I don't know where they live anymore. And I don't know, I lost my letter. But if you have it on an electronic copy, have it in your email so that you can access it at any time, as in addition to saving it on your computer.
I know I'm getting you this time. I know that a lot of times as professionals, we're asked if we can be references to folks. And that's a tricky one. I'm Department of Rehabilitation. So when I call, I say, hi, this is Spencer, Department of Rehab. Or when I'm answering questions, I'm answering my relationship with you. So if that's reviewing resumes, if that's considering job development, that's how I know the candidate who's being asked for me to give a reference. So keep that in mind when you have those references. You might not have a lot of references, and maybe that job developer is the best person for you to collaborate with, but just make sure you know how that they're going to be able to communicate what your skills are and from what angle they'll be communicating that.
Okay. So the next question is asking about including the LinkedIn profile, or including your LinkedIn profile on your resume. So do you feel like employers really like to see the LinkedIn profile on the resume?
I'll take this one.
Pros and cons?
I'll take this one. So one of the things we do when we're working with people, or a lot of us do, is we help them to create a master resume, right? So all of the jobs that you've had, all of the job duties that you had there, and creating that master resume is what allows you to make the functional resume that then attaches itself to a specific job that you're applying to. I feel like LinkedIn has provided us the opportunity to share both of those resumes with employers. And I think employers like that a lot as well. I work with a lot of employers in the counties that I cover, and I have only heard good things about having LinkedIn on the resume. So you turn in that functional resume that gives them only the information that's relevant to the job they're applying to. And then they get to go click on that LinkedIn profile and they get to see, oh, this person also has a wealth of knowledge and skills in these other areas, or they have been endorsed for these skills from different people. So I think, so my answer to that would be yes, I think it's an asset to have a LinkedIn account, regardless of what job field you're going into. I think it's absolutely a great thing to have on your resume for employers.
This is a LinkedIn question. This is like my my icing on the cake. I love LinkedIn. If you're not connected on LinkedIn, get connected on LinkedIn. I totally agree with that. One of the first things that I'll do with job seekers is I'll say, what does your LinkedIn account look like? Do you have an updated profile? Do you have an updated photo? Do you have updated information on there? And you can ask some of the team that I work with. Sometimes I ask them and the team managers as well. It's not only a time for finding work, it's a time to keep those relationships. I mean, think of the professionals that are on LinkedIn. I think of myself, if they ask me questions, I want to be there on LinkedIn to help them. But at the same point, if I'm looking for work, I'm also going to do that on there. And just to what Jessica said, we work with a lot of times state employment comes up, federal employment, and recruiters will look at LinkedIn. Recruiters like that. So I agree with what Jessica said.
Okay, and then the last question that I saw was somebody who had a question about ageism and that they believe that they're facing ageism. So does anybody have any suggestions for how this individual can become more marketable in this new era with also having some sort of disability?
I guess if we're linking it back to how can we improve the resume, maybe to avoid ageism, only going back 10 years, usually for jobs, leaving the years off of education, if maybe your education was in the past. I'm not sure if that's kind of where the question was going. Anyone else on the panel want to add to that?
Does this person feel like it's happening during the interviews or during the application process?
Let's see, I'm looking back through.
If you could just make another comment in the chat area, that would be helpful.
Or you can unmute yourself as well.
Yes.
And that's all right if you're uncomfortable doing that, that's fine too. A couple of things that I want to just touch on. I've actually had this conversation with somebody recently, and a lot of times employers, maybe they're thinking, you're not going to be able to spend a lot of time with us. Your time is, that's not true, especially now. I mean, people need to work. We need to work beyond what our regular retirement time is. And so being open about that, having that conversation, yeah, I'm looking to be here another 10, 15 years. I think that's fine. Making sure that your current technology or with technology and that information's on your resume, that's a really important one. You want to make sure that you're competitive. We talk a lot about digital technology and having digital skills. No matter what field you're in, that's a really important thing. But keep in mind too, I'm trying to think how, I guess my next thought would be more to the interview. So I'm going to stick with if we're looking at just resumes, make sure you're showing those skills. But I guess I did point, so in an interview, show that show those humanistic skills as well. It's really important to show that you're somebody that can collaborate, you're somebody that's creative, and you have compassion. Because you look at the employers that are hiring right now, those are the things that they're looking for. When you talk about those top things employers want, it's somebody who's got digital skills, no matter where it's at, and somebody who has humanistic skills. Somebody that can come in and be a part of a team, who has empathy, who has compassion, who has creativity, and is willing to do what the team needs to be done. So ageism, the challenging thing is, I know from both sides, ageism goes both ways. As I came into this position as a young counselor, I can't remember how many times I heard, what do you know about employment? And I'll look down their resume. I think, dude, I've had more jobs than you have. Don't give me that. And I grew my beard and I looked like I was 50 for a while. And somebody, I still got it. What are you doing trying to look different? But I believe that's a good thing to review some of the points there. And if you have different or additional questions, reach out to us. Reach out to whoever invited you on here today. If you're on LinkedIn, connect with us, and let's have more of a conversation on this, because this is great not only for us to do the one-on-one, but for this to open up for all the other folks that are on this call too.
And on the topic of ageism too, like I actually met with somebody recently who had a really good answer to it. And they said, I am, they acknowledge, I am older, but I have so much to offer. And I'm really excited about getting back into the workforce and, offering, all these different skills that I have. I'm comfortable with using the computer. And they kind of like knocked out any things that are unanswered questions or maybe stereotypes or attitudes that people may have about people that are older. They kind of knock that out by just clearly answering those unasked questions. They also said, my mom worked well into her 80s. And so I feel like I've got good genes behind me and I'm ready to, contribute to the workforce. And I was like, whoa, that was an excellent answer. Like, I couldn't have crafted a better answer myself. But so that's just kind of things to think about, is how do you kind of knock out those stereotypes and really just highlight your skills. And I think it was just a really excellent way to answer that.
I wanted to add to a comment in the chat about adding dates on resumes. Sometimes you should add dates on resumes, sometimes you should not. The one main thing to know about resumes is there's no hard and fast rule on how to do resumes. They're subjective. So you can take one resume and you could bring it to every single one of us today on the panel, and we would probably all give you a different critique and different suggestions for your resume. And that's because there's no hard and fast rules. So my advice to people when they're looking to get resume assistance, go to as many people as you possibly can, and then you get to choose what you like and what you dislike, and then you get to go try it out, right? So if you're trying it out and it's not working, then maybe you need to go revisit some of the ideas from the people who were originally helping you. But resumes are subjective, and they are about you, and they're a reflection of you and your experience. So just remember that ultimately they have to reflect what you want it to be.
Okay, and then we had one more question come in about preparing for interviews with the state. How do you recommend preparing for those? Do you recommend adding the interviewer, Spencer, to your LinkedIn beforehand or adding after? And how do you go about asking for help with preparing for interviewing? Anybody want to tackle this one?
I'm not one of the people on the panel who have interviewed with the state, so I do feel like we have some experts on here who could answer that.
Hi guys, I'll take it. This is Priscilla. Actually, if you go to the State Personnel Board website, there are specific, there's a specific link where you can click on it and it'll give you questions that you can prepare for that are related to state employment. And it breaks them down. Like if you're looking to get into like administrative, it'll give you a bunch of different questions that you can review prior to going into an administrative interview. If you're looking to go into like corrections, it'll give you questions related to like working in a correctional facility that you can review prior to going into the interview. So a lot of those questions are there's probably like over 100 questions per different category. And most of those are taken and actually asked during an interview. Of course, you're not going to remember all of those questions, but at least to get a sense of the type of questions and the way they structure them, it's really helpful to look at them. So I'll actually send the link over to Jessica maybe, and then you can probably share it or distribute it. I don't know how we can share that, but that way you guys can actually access the link and be able to go in there and look at the different questions. But preparing for a state interview is just like you would prepare for any other interview. You want to make sure that you practice. You want to make sure that you go in and that you're prepared, you're dressed the part. I just think that, you just want to make sure that you're ready for the interview. And going over the questions, I think, is very helpful. It was helpful for me whenever I first started state employment. I don't know, Kathy, Spencer, do you guys want to add anything as state employees?
The only thing I'd like to add is a really practical issue is it's usually a panel interview. So it'll be your potential supervisor, usually someone else that's in the role that you're interviewing for, and then a couple of support staff. So if you're not familiar with how to do panel interviews, that's something that I would, you can find information about that all over the internet. If you go to thebalance.com, they're great. LinkedIn, Indeed has some great information. And just so you can learn how to deal with a panel interview. And of course, during the age of COVID, you're going to have to be familiar with how to do Zoom interviews. And so that's something that you're going to want to maybe take a workshop on or find some information out on. But yeah, just find out when you get offered the interview, you can ask who will be on the panel, and they'll be able to tell you. That'll give you the names of the people so that when you're done, you can actually send a thank you email to them and follow up with them as well. And that's all Spencer, do you have anything you want to add?
Shoot, about LinkedIn, holy mackerel, do I ever. So yeah, I think what you guys are on point completely. I just sent over a link, and there's a tutorial for state jobs. If you haven't seen that, it's on the jobs.ca.gov, and it'll go through the whole YouTube page that'll walk folks through preparing for state employment. When we look at our job announcements, a lot of times you're going to get an office technician name or information is going to be that contact person. So that's a really cool person to connect with. But what I want to say is, recruiters, if there's any state agency you're interested in connecting with, go on LinkedIn, find that recruiter or find that agency, and you'll find the recruiter who's recruiting for that position. Connect with them. There's a lot of us on here who go to monthly recruiter roundtable meetings. And because we have about 160 state agencies, a lot of times folks think there's maybe 30, 35. We have 160 state agencies in the state of California. So there's a lot of opportunities. And yeah, just to confirm, state of California, I don't know a lot about Oregon, Arizona, New Jersey, which is not a state, but wait, is New Jersey? You guys got me here. But anyways, yeah, connect with those recruiters on LinkedIn, go to their trainings. A lot of the recruiters are providing trainings. If you're with some of the community colleges, the career centers now, we're seeing a lot of the career centers up and down the state who are providing resources. We've got Los Rios here in Sacramento and Sierra College. We're seeing Los Rios is doing a lot of presentations with recruiters and other private and other public employers throughout.
And I was just going to say too, with the state of California, when you apply for those positions, there's also a duty statement that should be attached to that application. So always go back into your profile, download the duty statement, highlight all of those key duties that you would be performing in that job, and think about how your previous work experience shows how you have done those duties or you are able to do those duties. I've almost done like a chart, like a table, where on the left-hand side, you have all those different duties, and on the right-hand side are examples of how you have skills in order to do those duties. And like examples, this is always key for interviews, is have those examples ready and treat interview preparation as a job. I mean, I will spend 3, 4, 5 days just myself preparing for an interview and practicing walking the employer through my resume. So, and practicing kind of top common interview questions. So those are kind of my 2 cents.
I also want to add, if you go to the Cal HR career website, right now they're really doing a push to promote state employment, and they're having different workshops on like career pathways. So if you're interested in administrative, they're having workshops on how you can get started with state employment, what the interview process looks like, and then it talks about different careers to promote within the state of California. So I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in applying with the state, to go onto the Cal HR website, and I'll put it in the chat as well. And then I did see somebody ask, duty statement, is that the same as a job description? And the answer is yes, it's very similar. So a job description is going to describe how to do the job. a lot of state and federal positions are more detailed. So a duty statement is going to go in depth in regards to what you would be responsible for if you were to attain that position. So it is very similar, yes.
I think that's all the questions we have. Spencer, do you want to close us out?
I do. I was actually we were talking about all this state recruitment. There's a state workshop that's coming up. And I was trying to find that flyer, and it'll probably take me a second. So we might just send it out on the Eventbrite website. So this is great. I appreciate everybody being here. We do these every month. We used to call this Fourth Thursday. Can you guess why? Because it's the fourth Thursday of every month. See, we're always trying to work on teaching and doing all this kind of stuff. So thank you everyone for coming. If you have additional questions, once you leave here, feel free to reach out to us. You can address any questions you want on the Eventbrite. I think that's where we've been doing a lot, and it goes to several of us. So you'll get a comment back from one or multiple. I think that's happened in the past too, where we all answer the same question. So kind of like that resume piece, you might get a different answer, or you'll get the same answer, but with different details from each of us. So
real quick, Spencer,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you? So you said someone in the chat said look out on Eventbrite. So just to let you know, after this workshop is done, the recording will be processed, and then you will get an email with a copy of the recording, a copy of the presentation, and then a copy of, or not a copy of, I'm sorry, the links that Priscilla had mentioned and put in the chat box. So look for that either, or by tomorrow afternoon, you should be receiving that email.
It's awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, happy Thursday, everyone. It's wonderful seeing you, and we look forward to seeing everyone again very soon. Keep up the great work. Good luck job seeking, and don't forget to let us know when you get those positions. Have a good day.